What if one wrong number could change everything you thought you knew about kindness? Rose Callahan stood in her tiny kitchen at 2 a.m, her waitress uniform still smelling of coffee and bacon grease, when her phone buzzed. The voice on the other end was rough, urgent. "I need you to come. Now. It's about my mother." Before Rose could explain he had the wrong number, the man's voice cracked. "Please, she's asking for Marie. I can't lose her tonight." Rose should have hung up, should have gone to bed, but something in that breaking voice reminded her of her own father's last hours, when every moment mattered. She grabbed her coat. The address he'd given was across town, in a neighborhood she'd been warned to avoid. 20 minutes later, she stood outside an iron gate, her heart pounding, wondering what she'd just walked into. "Where are you watching from tonight?" Rose had been a waitress at Meg's Diner for 12 years. She knew every regular's order by heart, could spot a bad tipper before they sat down, and had perfected the art of smiling through exhaustion. At 58, she'd raised 2 kids on those tips, sent them both to college, and now lived alone in a studio apartment that leaked when it rained. Her life was small, predictable, and mostly safe. That's why standing outside this mansion at 2:30 in the morning felt like stepping into someone else's story. The gate buzzed open before she could change her mind. The house beyond was old but elegant, with warm light spilling from downstairs windows. A man appeared in the doorway, and even from a distance, Rose could see he wasn't young. Maybe 60, with silver threading through dark hair. Wearing an expensive shirt with the sleeves rolled up, his face was lined with worry. "Marie?" he called out, his voice the same one from the phone. "No, I'm—" Rose walked closer, her shoes crunching on the gravel drive. "I'm Rose. You called my number by mistake, but you sounded so upset, and I thought—" The man's face went through several emotions at once. Confusion, then embarrassment, then something that looked like despair. "I dialed wrong. God, I'm sorry. I've been up for 36 hours. I wasn't thinking straight." He rubbed his face with both hands. "Marie's her night nurse. I must have hit the wrong contact." "Is your mother okay?" Rose found herself asking. He looked at her for a long moment, and Rose saw the exhaustion written deep in his features. This wasn't a young man's tiredness. This was the bone-deep weariness of someone who'd been carrying weight for too long. "She's dying," he said simply. "The hospice nurse said it could be tonight or tomorrow. She keeps asking for people who aren't here anymore. My father, her sister, and Marie, who apparently stepped out for a cigarette and isn't answering her damn phone." Rose should have left then, should have wished him well and gone home to her lumpy mattress, but she'd sat with her own father as he died, had held his hand through the confusion and fear of those last hours. She remembered how desperately she'd wanted someone, anyone, to just be there. "Would it help if I sat with you?" she heard herself say. "Until the nurse comes back? Nobody should be alone for this." The man stared at her like she'd spoken another language. "You don't even know us." "No," Rose agreed. "But I know what it's like, and I'm already here." His name was Vincent Marchetti, and he led her through a house that smelled of old wood and lavender. The downstairs was decorated with photos spanning decades. Weddings, christenings, family dinners with dozens of people crowded around long tables. Rose noticed one thing immediately. In the newer photos, the crowds were smaller. Vincent alone with an elderly woman. Vincent at what looked like a funeral. The family, whatever it had been, had shrunk. His mother, Elena, was tiny in the hospital bed that had been set up in what must have once been a dining room. She was 91, Vincent told her, and had been sharp as a tack until 6 months ago, when the cancer came back with a vengeance. Now she drifted between sleep and wakefulness, sometimes lucid, sometimes lost in memories from 70 years ago. Rose pulled a chair close and took the old woman's hand. Elena's eyes opened, cloudy but searching. "Marie?" "No, sweetheart," Rose said gently. "Marie's coming soon." "I'm Rose. I'm here to keep you company." Elena studied her face with surprising intensity. "You have kind eyes," she whispered. "My Vincent, he forgets about kind eyes. Always business, business. No time for kind." Vincent made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been something else. He stood by the window, arms crossed, looking like a man who didn't know what to do with an act of unexpected kindness. For the next hour, Rose sat with Elena, talking softly about nothing and everything. She told her about the diner, about her kids, about the time her daughter's cat got stuck in a tree and the fire department had to come. Simple stories, the kind that don't require much follow-up. Elena would drift off, then wake and seem surprised but pleased to find Rose still there. Vincent stayed near the window, making quiet phone calls, checking his watch, radiating a tension that had nothing to do with grief and everything to do with control slipping away. At one point, Elena gripped Rose's hand tighter. "You'll look after my boy?" she asked, suddenly lucid. "He thinks he has to be hard, but he's got a good heart, buried deep." "Mom," Vincent said from across the room, his voice tight. "I'll do my best," Rose promised, though she had no idea what she was promising or why. The night nurse, Marie, finally showed up at 4 a.m, full of apologies and smelling of cigarette smoke. By then, something had shifted in the room. Elena had fallen into a deeper sleep, her breathing steady but labored, and Vincent had stopped looking at Rose like she was an intruder and started looking at her like she was a mystery he needed to solve. Rose went home as dawn broke, expecting never to see Vincent Marchetti again. She worked her shift at the diner on 2 hours of sleep, mixing up orders and forgetting to refill coffee cups. Her manager, Meg, asked if she was coming down with something. Rose just shook her head, unable to explain the strange night, or why she couldn't stop thinking about the elegant old house and the man with tired eyes who'd looked at her like kindness was a foreign language. 2 days later, Elena died peacefully in her sleep. Rose only knew because Vincent called her. "I wanted to thank you," he said, his voice formal, distant. "What you did staying that night, it meant something to her. To me." "I'm glad I could help," Rose said, and meant it. "The funeral's Saturday, 1 o'clock at St. Anthony's. If you wanted to come." Rose went, wearing her only black dress, feeling out of place among the expensive suits and designer clothes. But Vincent found her afterward, introduced her to his mother's few remaining friends, and insisted she come back to the house for the gathering. That's when Rose started to understand that Vincent Marchetti's life was more complicated than she'd imagined. The men who came to pay respects weren't just old family friends. They moved with a certain wariness, spoke in low voices, and had that quality Rose had seen in men who'd spent time looking over their shoulders. At the diner, she'd served enough cops and criminals to recognize the difference. These weren't cops. And the way they deferred to Vincent, the way they called him Mr. Marchetti, with a weight behind it, told her everything she needed to know about what his family had been. She should have been afraid. Should have made an excuse and left. But Vincent had been nothing but respectful to her, and she'd learned long ago that people were more than their worst moments. He found her in the kitchen, where she'd retreated to help clean up, unable to just stand around making small talk. "You don't have to do that," he said, watching her wash dishes. "Keeps my hands busy," Rose replied. "I'm sorry about your mother. She seemed like a lovely woman." She was. Vincent picked up a dish towel, started drying. They worked in silence for a while, and Rose was struck by how comfortable it felt. "She talked about you, after that night. Said you had healing hands. I'm just a waitress. You're more than that." He set down the plate he'd been drying. "Rose, I need to be honest with you. My family, we weren't always legitimate. My father ran things in this neighborhood for 40 years. When he died, I took over. I've spent the last decade trying to get out, go legal, but it's not simple. People still see me a certain way, still expect certain things." Rose met his eyes. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you should know who I am before—" He stopped, seemed to struggle with the words. "My mother's dying wish was that I find someone kind. She said I'd forgotten how to let people in, and then you showed up at 2 a.m. because a stranger sounded desperate." Over the next few weeks, Vincent kept calling, first with thank you gifts, flowers, a basket of expensive chocolates that Rose shared with the other waitresses. Then with invitations. Dinner at a restaurant far nicer than any place Rose had ever been. A walk through the botanical gardens. Coffee at a cafe where they talked for 3 hours about everything and nothing. Rose's daughter, Katie, was suspicious. "Mom, you met him how? And he's connected to what?" But Rose's son Thomas surprised her. "If he makes you happy, Mom, and he's treating you right, Maybe give it a chance. You've been alone since Dad died. That's 10 years. The twist came on a Tuesday evening. Rose was closing at the diner when 3 men walked in, and she knew instantly they weren't there for pie. They asked for Vincent Marchetti, their voices polite but their eyes hard. Rose said she didn't know what they were talking about. "Ma'am," one of them said, "we know he's been seeing you. We need to deliver a message. Tell him Marco Santini hasn't forgotten. Tell him debts don't disappear just because you want to go straight." Rose's hands shook as she locked up that night. She called Vincent, told him what happened. There was a long silence on the line. "I'll take care of it," he said finally. "And Rose, I'm sorry. I never should have brought you into this." "You didn't bring me into anything," she said firmly. "I walked in myself." "But Vincent, are you in danger?" "I've been in danger my whole life," he said, and there was such weariness in his voice. "I'm trying to get out. I've been paying off old obligations, selling properties, cutting ties. But some people don't want to let go. They see it as weakness. It's not weakness to want a better life. My mother used to say that." His voice softened. "Rose, you should stay away from me for a while, until I handle this." "No," Rose said, surprising herself with her certainty. "Running away from hard things doesn't make them easier. I learned that the hard way. If this moment touched your heart, if you understand what it means to stand beside someone when things get difficult, please give this story a thumbs up. It reminds us that sometimes the bravest thing is simply showing up. That's when the real threat revealed itself." Vincent's car was vandalized the next night. A brick through Rose's apartment window followed 2 days later with a note. "Tell your boyfriend to pay attention." Vincent was frantic, insisted on hiring security for her, wanted to end things to keep her safe. But Rose had spent too many years playing it safe, and she'd seen something in Vincent that reminded her of her own late husband. A good man trying to do right by people who wouldn't let him. The crisis came to a head on a Thursday night. Rose was working late shift when Vincent burst through the diner door, his face pale. "You need to come with me, now." Meg took one look at them and nodded. "Go." In Vincent's car, he explained. Marco Santini had kidnapped Vincent's nephew, Tony, the only family Vincent had left besides some distant cousins. Tony was 23, working at a legal construction company Vincent had started, trying to live a clean life. Now he was being held as leverage. Marco wanted Vincent to do one last job, moving money that would tie Vincent back into the old life permanently, or Tony would pay the price. Why not just go to the police? Rose asked. Vincent's laugh was bitter. "The police? Rose? Half the cops in this city looked the other way for my father. They won't help us now. And if I go to the ones who are clean, they'll use it as an excuse to bring everything down on my head. Tony would be caught in the crossfire." They drove to Vincent's house, where 2 of his old associates waited. These men were older, in their 60s like Vincent, with faces that showed every hard decision they'd ever made. They looked at Rose with confusion. "Who's this?" one asked. "Someone who helps me think clearly," Vincent said. "Now tell me the options." There weren't many. Marco had people watching Tony in an abandoned warehouse near the docks. If Vincent went there with the money, he'd be walking into a trap. If he didn't go, Tony died. If he called in help from the old network, he'd owe favors that would trap him forever. Every path led somewhere dark. Rose sat at Vincent's kitchen table, listening to these men plan like they were discussing a business merger instead of potential violence. Her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she couldn't taste. She thought about her own children, safe in their suburban homes with their normal problems, mortgage payments and parent-teacher conferences. She thought about her late husband, Jim, who'd been a mechanic and came home every night smelling of motor oil, whose biggest moral dilemma was whether to charge a widow full price for repairs. "There's another option," she said quietly. The men stopped talking and looked at her. "I go," Rose continued. "I deliver whatever Marco wants. I'm nobody to him, just a waitress. He won't see me as a threat." "Absolutely not," Vincent said immediately. "Think about it," Rose insisted. "He's expecting you or one of your people. He's expecting someone who knows the game. I don't know the game. I'm just a woman bringing something to someone. And once I'm inside, once I can see Tony, we call the police then. Because it's a kidnapping, Vincent. Not your old business. A regular crime with a regular victim." One of the older men, Carlo, slowly nodded. She's not wrong. Marco's got no reason to hurt her. She's got no history with us. Vincent stood up, paced to the window. I can't ask you to do this. You're not asking. I'm offering. Rose walked over to him. Vincent, your mother made me promise to look after you. And that boy, Tony, he's just trying to live his life. I've got 2 kids of my own. I can't stand by and watch someone's child be used as a weapon. Have you ever faced a moment where you had to choose between safety and doing what's right? When love for someone, whether family or something else, pushed you to be braver than you thought possible? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your stories matter. The plan came together quickly once Vincent reluctantly agreed. Rose would deliver a briefcase with enough cash to satisfy Marco, while police Vincent trusted, a detective who'd been straight with him in the past, would be positioned nearby. The risk was real. If Marco suspected anything, if his men searched Rose too thoroughly, if they decided she knew too much, things could go very wrong very fast. At midnight, Rose stood in the parking lot of the abandoned warehouse, clutched the briefcase with sweaty hands. She'd changed into simple clothes, jeans, a sweater, practical shoes in case she needed to run. Vincent had wanted to wire her with audio, but they'd decided it was too risky. If Marco's people found it, they'd know it was a setup. I'll be listening on the police scanner, Vincent said, his hand gentle on her face. And Rose, if anything feels wrong, you run. Forget the briefcase, forget the plan. You just run. She kissed him then, quick and hard, tasting coffee and fear. I'll be fine. I've been handling difficult men my whole life. This is just one more. But walking into that warehouse, hearing her footsteps echo in the vast, empty space, Rose wondered if she'd finally taken on more than she could handle. Marco Santini was younger than Rose expected. Maybe 50, with slicked-back hair and expensive clothes that didn't quite hide the violence in his eyes. He sat in an old office chair in the middle of the warehouse floor, 3 men standing around him. Tony was tied to a chair 20 feet away, his face bruised but his eyes alert. You're not Marchetti, Marco said, not standing. No, I'm the person he sent, Rose replied, keeping her voice steady. He figured you wouldn't hurt someone who has nothing to do with your business. Marco laughed. Smart man or coward. Haven't decided which. He gestured for the briefcase. Bring it here. Rose walked forward, her heart hammering. She handed over the briefcase, and Marco opened it, rifled through the cash. This doesn't even cover half of what he owes. It's what he could pull together, Rose said. He's been liquidating everything to go legitimate. This is all there is. All there is. Marco's smile was cold. Let me tell you about Vincent Marchetti. His father and my father. They built this neighborhood together. Then Vincent's father got greedy, pushed my father out, and Vincent inherited an empire built on my family's back. Now he wants to walk away clean? No, debts get paid. In money or in blood. Rose forced herself to meet his eyes. That boy over there, he wasn't even born when your fathers were fighting. He's trying to build an honest life. What does hurting him prove? It proves Vincent doesn't get to just leave, Marco snapped. It proves there are consequences. That's when Tony spoke up, his voice hoarse. My uncle doesn't even talk to me about the old days. He kept me away from all of it. I didn't know about any of this until tonight. Marco stood, walked toward Tony. Rose's breath caught. This was the moment. Either the police would move now, or she'd have to improvise. You know what I think? Marco said, pulling out a gun. I think Vincent sent this nice lady because he knew I'd hesitate. But I don't hesitate anymore. He turned the gun toward Rose. 2 things happened at once. Tony somehow got his feet under him, and despite being tied to the chair, rushed forward, chair and all, slamming into Marco's legs. And the warehouse doors burst open with a crash as police flooded in, voices shouting commands, lights blinding. Marco's men scattered. Marco himself was on the ground under Tony's chair, the gun skittering across concrete. In 30 seconds it was over. Police had everyone on the ground except Rose and Tony, who were quickly moved aside by officers. Rose found herself shaking, the adrenaline finally hitting. A detective, the one Vincent had contacted, appeared beside her. Ma'am, you're incredibly lucky, and incredibly brave. Probably more brave than smart, but we got them all. Vincent arrived minutes later, running through the police tape before anyone could stop him. He went straight to Tony first, checking him over, then pulled Rose into his arms so tightly she could barely breathe. "Don't you ever," he whispered against her hair, "ever do anything like that again, okay?" Rose said, her voice muffled against his chest. "Okay." At the police station, Rose gave her statement while Vincent sat beside her, holding her hand like he was afraid she'd disappear. Marco Santini was charged with kidnapping, assault, and illegal weapons possession. His men turned on each other quickly, each trying to cut deals. The detective told Vincent that this might finally clean up the last of the old connections that had been haunting him. "You're free," the detective said, "or as free as someone with your history gets to be. Keep your nose clean, keep running those legitimate businesses, and we've got no reason to bother you." As dawn broke, Vincent drove Rose home. Neither of them had slept. At her apartment door, he said, "I need to ask you something." Rose waited. "Why'd you do it? Risk everything for someone you barely know?" Rose thought about her answer. "My Jim, my late husband. He used to say that good people end up alone because they're afraid to fight for connection. After he died, I played it safe for 10 years. Went to work, came home, didn't make waves. Then one night, a wrong number showed me someone who needed help, and I remembered what it felt like to matter to someone. Your mother saw something in me that I'd forgotten was there, and I saw something in you worth protecting." Vincent kissed her then, properly, a kiss that tasted like coffee and new beginnings. If you've been following Rose and Vincent's journey, if this story has touched your heart and you want to hear more tales about courage, second chances, and unexpected love, please subscribe to our channel. Every story we share is crafted with care for viewers like you. "Move in with me," Vincent said suddenly. "I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other 2 months, but I've got this big house and it's too empty. I've got a life I'm trying to rebuild into something good, and I want you in it." Rose smiled. "Let me think about it," she said, but they both knew her answer. Rose did move in, though it took her 3 more weeks to work up the courage. Her daughter was skeptical at first, but softened when she visited and saw how Vincent looked at her mother, like she was something precious and unexpected. Her son just hugged Vincent and said, "You take care of her, or you'll answer to me." And Vincent had replied with complete seriousness, "I will. I promise." The house that had felt like a museum when Rose first arrived slowly transformed into a home. She brought her small collection of books, her mother's quilt, and her habit of singing while she cooked. Vincent brought his morning routine of reading the paper at the kitchen table, his terrible jokes, and his way of reaching for her hand whenever she walked past. They settled into a life that was surprisingly ordinary. Rose cut back her hours at the diner but didn't quit entirely. Meg needed her, and Rose needed the connection to the world beyond Vincent's past. Vincent sold off the last of his family's questionable properties and invested everything in legitimate businesses. The construction company Tony worked for expanded. They opened a restaurant that hired people trying to get back on their feet after prison, small things that mattered. Tony became a regular fixture at Sunday dinners, bringing his girlfriend, who was studying nursing. Vincent's old associates, the ones who'd chosen to go straight like him, would stop by occasionally. They were men trying to figure out how to be grandfathers and retirees instead of enforcers. Rose welcomed them all, served them coffee, and listened to their stories, gently steering conversations toward grandchildren and hobbies instead of the old days. On the first anniversary of the night Rose had received that wrong number call, Vincent took her back to the botanical gardens where they'd walked early in their relationship. He'd arranged for them to plant a tree in Elena's memory, a Japanese maple that would turn brilliant red each autumn. As they patted soil around the young tree's roots, Vincent said, "My mother would have loved you, really loved you. Not just been grateful or impressed. She would have seen you as the daughter she never had." Rose wiped her eyes. "I wish I'd known her longer." "She knew you long enough to change everything," Vincent replied. "That one night, watching you sit with her, seeing how you just showed up because someone needed help, it reminded me there was another way to live. That maybe being hard all the time wasn't strength. Maybe real strength was letting people in." They stood there in the autumn sunlight, Two people in their late 50s who'd found each other through the most unlikely circumstances. And Rose thought about all the paths that had led to this moment. The wrong number that wasn't wrong at all. The impulse to help a stranger. The choice to stay when things got dangerous instead of running toward safety. Life wasn't perfect. Vincent still had nightmares sometimes about the old days. Rose still worried about money even though she didn't need to anymore. Old habits from years of living paycheck to paycheck. They argued about small things, like whether the thermostat should be at 68 or 70, and bigger things, like whether Vincent was truly free of his past or just hiding from it better. But they also laughed together. Real laughter that came from the belly. They held hands walking through the neighborhood. They built something together that neither had thought possible at this stage of life, a genuine partnership based on respect and understanding, and the simple courage it took to be vulnerable with another. Person Rose's grandson, Katie's boy, called Vincent Uncle Vince within 6 months. At Christmas, the house was full of people again. Not the crowds from the old family photos, but a new kind of family. Rose's children and their families. Tony and his girlfriend, a few friends from the diner, and Vincent's construction workers who'd become more than employees. Elena's photo sat on the mantel, and sometimes Rose would look at it and whisper, "I'm looking after him just like I promised, and he's looking after me too." In the end, that's what the story was about. Not about mafia bosses or danger or dramatic rescues, though those were part of it. It was about two people who'd spent most of their lives being what others needed them to be. Vincent, the hard man protecting his family's legacy, Rose, the caretaker, putting everyone else first. Finally finding someone who saw them as they truly were. Complicated, imperfect, trying their best. Worthy of love anyway. The wrong number had been the rightest thing that ever happened to both of them. If you enjoyed Rose and Vincent's journey, if it reminded you that it's never too late for new beginnings, please take a moment to like this video. Leave a comment telling us about a time when an unexpected moment changed your life. We love hearing your stories. And subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales that celebrate the courage, wisdom, and resilience that comes with living a full life. Thank you for spending this time with us, for opening your hearts to Rose and Vincent's story. May you always have the courage to answer when life calls, even at 2 a.m, even when it seems like the wrong number, because sometimes the wrong number is exactly right. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.